This is the ultimate way to make seams on painted wood completely and permanently invisible. The repair I'm going to show you will work perfectly in scenarios like this. Plywood against plywood that is nailed and, more importantly, glued together. The glue in the plywood and the filler and the glue joining the pieces together will make it so the wood cannot shift. In a scenario like this, it allows us to perform a perfect repair completely invisible. I can't tell you how aggravating it is working in small spaces like this with no countertops on yet. This spot would have been perfect, but no. I'm gonna go have to set up on the floor somewhere. I did look around for a board for a few minutes, but there really was no luck. Just ain't my day. First and foremost, we always start with a clean surface. I can't tell you how many times I fixed damages or failed repairs from other tradesmen because they did not clean the surface. Doing this literally adds 30 seconds to the job. You'd be a fool not to. I like this kitchen cabinet cleaner. It's a plant-based formula that's great for a regular use basis on food and dirt. It leaves no streaks, no residue, no toxic odors, and makes cleaning easy. Comes with a scrub brush, which really agitates the surface you're cleaning. Check out this before and after from one of my other videos. This thing works wonders. And the best part is, you can get it on Amazon. I put a link in the description for you. In this case, the carpenter did a phenomenal job in making the filler flush to the panel. Not 100% flush, that's near impossible, but really, really good and makes my job a lot easier. Even though the contractor said these pieces were glued together, I need to be 100% certain, so I'm going to start by injecting a CA glue in between the filler and the panel. You can use whatever you want, as long as the glue is not flexible. The green one is thicker, so I use my finger to push the glue into the seam and follow after it with a lacquer rag to clean off the excess. Less sanding later. I do the same thing with the pink one, which is much thinner, but it gets in all the nooks and crannies that the green one cannot. Together, they bond really well. Once I hit it with the accelerator, the glue dries in literal seconds, ready to sand. You can find a link to it in the description below. Now, by injecting the glue, this ensures that there will be no movement and no flexing down the road. If there is movement, the repair will crack. Next thing I'm going to do is give this a rough sand with 80 grit sandpaper. This is going to knock down any glue residue that's still behind and also give us a really great texture for the filler to grab onto. One little trick I like to do is outline my fill area with some blue masking tape. This keeps my filler all in one place and it makes it so there's a lot less cleanup afterwards. Now, what I'm going to be using for filler is Bondo, which is automotive Bondo. It works really well. And for this case, I'm trying out this new stuff that dries in just 15 minutes. Typically, I use just the regular stuff, but I'm trying this stuff out. I used it on a job previously. I gotta say, it didn't sand all that great, but I'm gonna try it again using a lot more hardener, and we'll see if that makes any difference. I like the idea of having the fast drying one just because it saves time on the repair, but at the end of the day, the stuff has to perform. So if I could get this to work, great. If not, I'll go back to the other stuff. It's all about how nicely and easily it sands once the Bondo is dry. Now, I like to use a metal putty knife. This allows you to have more even pressure without really having to force it, rather than those plastic ones that kind of bend and flex and twist a little bit. This is more of a stiff blade. It does have a slight flex, but the stiffer blade just gives you a much more even application. So I'm just working this into the taped off area. You could see all the Bondo is going exactly where we need it and where we want it. You'll notice where I taped off, I left a little bit of area open to the left of the seam, and the entire piece of the filler is also exposed. So this is going to give us a nice, even, flat coat of Bondo all the way across. And once we sand it out later, you'll see just how smooth and level this becomes. Now, you really only have a few short minutes of great working time with Bondo, as then it begins to harden up. So you want to go quickly, but also be patient, because the smoother that you get the Bondo during this process, the sanding later on becomes a lot easier, and this will help ensure a more smooth, flush coating. After giving the Bondo a few minutes to set up, it's time to take the tape off before it dries completely. At this point, the tape is able to cut a really nice, clean, crisp, straight line for the Bondo. And you can see all the extra stuff that was on the tape otherwise would have been on the cabinet itself. So now the working area that we have with the Bondo is consolidated only into this one area. While the Bondo is drying, it's time to start masking off this place. Everybody has their own techniques, but I like using the 3M hand masker. It saves a ton of time because it does the plastic and the tape at the same time and you just pull it down. It also is statically charged, so any overspray that's in the air will actually cling to the plastic. Helps keep the whole area clean. Other than that, there's really no rhyme or reason to this. Just cover everything in the room that you don't want paint on. The only real important thing I do here is I like to use this green masking paper around the areas that I'm spraying, because this green paper has properties that does not allow the paint to seep through. Even though I have plastic down and the plastic won't let the paint go through, it's just an outer layer of protection. Plastic is clear. You never really know when you have little holes or tears in it. Now, another cool trick I like to use for masking is when I'm taping along the edges of these end panels. Instead of just taking my time and trying to be very, very precise about lining up the edge of the tape to the edge of the panel, I just put the tape on and then follow behind with a brand new, clean, really sharp razor blade. Not only is this going to give me a perfectly close cut straight line on the edge, but it's also really satisfying to do. One thing that really blows my mind that I never see other tradesmen doing, mainly painters doing this sort of thing, is installing an explosion-proof exhaust fan for proper ventilation. They'll just tent off a room, spray, and have all that overspray just floating around. One spark, that thing ignites, you're done. So it really doesn't take much to put an exhaust fan in the window, mask that off. This way you have proper airflow, helps cut down on the smell, it's just a lot safer. I'm going to be using 120 grit sandpaper wrapped around this sanding block. It's a felt block. This helps ensure a flat, even sanding. Now, I like to use this a lot for many things, but I found in this application, it was really hard to kind of get in there on the angles that I need to sand effectively. So I ended up not using the block and just folded up the paper a bunch of times, made it stiff. This way, at least it's a somewhat hard pad, and sanded it by hand. After I clean up this dust, I'm going to hit it with the orbital sanding machine. This will just help ensure a smoother, flusher surface. And because this is just, unfinished sheetrock, the backsplash isn't up yet, I don't really have to worry about dinging it up, which allows me to get even closer to the edge of the panel. Of course, I sanded the rest of the panel since I'm going to be spraying this entire thing. So now I'm just taking my lacquer rag and wiping down the whole thing. This is just to clean off any more dust that's still on there. Even the vacuum couldn't get up, and just help remove any oils, greases, or any foreign substance that should not be on the panel, which could affect how the paint lays down. When it comes to the Bondo, I lightly, very lightly just float over it with this rag because the lacquer will actually eat the Bondo, and we don't want that. So after that's done, this is our final result. You could see the high and low spots from where the primer had to fill in, and you get the idea. So now it's perfectly flush. We are ready for primer. With our back wall covered up with the green paper, I do a little test spray to make sure it atomizes nicely, and I go ahead and hit this with primer. Now I end up doing about 3 coats with the primer, giving it about 5 minutes to dry in between, and this allows it to lay down really nicely. While the primer sets up, I'm going to go ahead and mix up my paint for the top coat. This is the smallest working area I've ever had to deal with. Unfortunately, it's not ideal, but it's going to work. So go ahead, mix up my paint, add the thinner, add the catalyst, add a little flow enhancer, and we are good to go. The primer is now dry, but it needs to be a little harder so I could sand it better. I'm going to speed this process along a little bit by using the hair dryer to cook it, and then after that cools down by itself, I will go ahead and sand it with 320. Now I'm just adjusting the settings on the gun against the green paper so I could see how well atomized the paint is coming out. If there's too much paint coming out, well then it'll run. And if there's not enough, then it won't lay down smooth. So there really is a fine sweet spot you gotta find in order to have a good quality finish, especially while spraying something upright. If it was laying down, it's a lot more forgiving. You can go heavier on the paint, a thicker coating, and it melts right into each other. But upright, you gotta find that sweet spot. So here we go. I'm going horizontally first, and then I'm going to switch the gun and go vertically up and down. This is called the box method, and this ensures a nice even coating throughout the whole thing. So once this is done, I'm going to give this about 10 minutes or so to kind of set up, and then follow it over with the second and final coat. After the paint has had its proper time to dry, it's time to start tearing down all that masking we worked so hard on putting up. This is the best feeling, but sometimes on larger jobs, it kind of feels like there's no end in it because there's just so much masking.
It's been just under 1 hour since I sprayed it and it's already dried to the touch. Literally, you can touch it. Now this obviously depends on what type of paint you use, but check it out how nice and flat this paint laid down, and look at our seam. Our seam is no more. So it came out really great. You can't even tell, even putting up a light to it. There's no shadow, there's no wave to it. Perfectly flat, perfectly smooth, invisible repair. Now the paint has a very slight orange peel texture, but the paint is still very fresh. So over the next day or two, as it dries and cures, it'll shrink in and level out even more. Not bad for a 1 day job. I think all in all, I have about 5 or 6 hours doing this job start to finish. That's not bad considering your alternative of having to rip out everything, wait for new panels to come in, and just creates more of a mess.